This is Channel 2's Video Magazine with Harry Porterfield and Susan Anderson. 2 on 2.
Good evening.
Hello, and welcome to 2 on 2.
And then Bob Wallace will give you a ride on a coal-burning railroad that is proving to be a lifesaver for some merchants in downstate Illinois.
Times are bad. It's comforting to look to the past. Through the maze of time, the way things were almost always looks better than the way they are today. When economic times went bad in southern Illinois, folks there did look back, and they came up with more than mere nostalgia. They found some real answers to some hard questions with an old-fashioned railroad. Bob Wallace tracks the story.
Here in Williamson County, the sound of survival these days is the deep, throaty whine of an old steam engine snaking along a mere 8.5 miles of track. The whistle heralds victory because this is the railroad that saved a town. When you save a town, you rescue more than just buildings and streets. You save people.
You raise a family and the kids go to school and you hope, like everything, that they're going to stay around the community that you grew up in. But when they have to go to Chicago or Detroit or New York or wherever to get a job, or hopefully get a job, it kills the family, it kills these communities, and that's what's been happening.
Former design engineer Hugh Crane, born in Tinley Park, remembers how a crisis almost killed this downstate community of Marion, about 320 miles south of Chicago. It was 4 years ago, and the Illinois Central Gulf was asking to shut down its freight service to this town of 14,000, a move that would have forced businesses to truck goods 60 miles to the next closest railhead at disastrous expense, one that would have cost merchants their livelihood. In the midst of all this, there was an alternative chugging down the tracks every day, the Crab Orchard and Egyptian Railroad, so named because it was ferrying tourists through the Crab Orchard Wildlife Refuge in a part of Illinois called Little Egypt. It was a two-man operation then, run by Crane and another former design engineer, Herb Soberg of Milwaukee. But it had been waiting for the chance to prove its business worth, not as a passenger line, but as the only commercial freight operation to use steam engines on the North American continent. The way Crane and Soberg saw it back then, the future was coal, and there was more soft coal in southern Illinois than just about anywhere else in the world.
Our big engine's at 4,000 horsepower. We'd have to get at least 2 of the biggest diesels to come up with that kind of horsepower. Everyone's going to have to catch on that they're going to be coal burned, and there's going to be $2 gasoline.
But here in Marion, they didn't want to wait for fuel costs to soar, so townspeople got together and bought themselves the CO&E Railroad. It's 8.5 miles of track, a second steam engine, and 200 leased freight cars, all for $300,000. It was a debt the railroad's owners were expected to gradually repay. That was about 3 years ago. Since then, these flatbeds and piggyback trucks have meant survival for Marion. Locals insist the Crab Orchard Railroad saved one of their biggest industries, a massive Norge appliance plant in nearby Heron. And it provided a new market for abundant southern Illinois coal, soft coal, considered unusable in many other areas. To Marion Mayor Robert Butler, these facts alone make the Crab Orchard and Egyptian indispensable.
Any community, whether it's the size of Marion or the size of Chicago, is always moving one way or another. It's never standing still. It's either moving backward or it's moving forward. We propose to have Marion move forward, and we think the railroad is, well, I wouldn't say that we're going to move forward on the back of the track of the railroad, but it might be appropriate.
Mayor Butler's enthusiasm is just another sweet victory for Crane and Soberg, but their triumph comes at some expense. Crane, Soberg, and a third partner endured meager profits when the line operated as a tourist railroad. Their friends were skeptical when they pulled up stakes, both of them engineering teachers at Midwest colleges, and bought a mighty old steam engine for $5,000. And in 1977, the fledgling Crab Orchard Corporation was struck by disaster. Its depot burned to the ground. Now, some saw that as poetic justice, since the mammoth terminal building never should have been there anyway. It was intended for Marion, Kentucky. It ended up here only because some hapless railroad employee read his maps wrong. The fire forced Crane and Soberg and their staff of 6 to operate from some rickety old IC cars, borrowed from a spot very familiar to Chicagoans. But that's about the only touch of the urban north that remains here. Crane and Soberg, both transplanted from big cities, are quite at home in Little Marion, saving businesses money and saving people jobs. On the Crab Orchard Railroad, they think that's almost as important as saving a life.
Well, now the Crab Orchard Railroad line has tested the water and found it comfortable. Other railroads may be following its lead with short freight lines that custom tailor their service.
And other lines are also considering returning to steam power. As a matter of fact, the Canadian Railroad that sold the Crab Orchard its first steam engine and was glad to get rid of it then, now wants to buy it back. That's how good things in southern Illinois look from north of the border.